On a terrace under the starry sky, a man and a woman embrace. The woman speaking of her own death, her elegant skirt spreading out at her feet. The white-haired man, Felix, lifts her chin, calls her Amelia, and then pulls her into his arms, holding her close against his shoulder. Amelia's blue eyes widen as she remembers his training. Felix whispers Amelia's name, confessing with a gentle smile that he has always loved her. He holds her tightly, admitting that his whole life he has been waiting for this moment. Lying on the floor, Amelia thinks that after 700 years, she will finally be freed from eternity. As he kisses her, she thinks that this will be her first and last time. A woman looks out the window at a peaceful vista as a narrator sets the scene in the Charlier Empire. The founding monarch, Iris Charlier, sits on his throne after protecting the land from the hardships of war. A family tree shows that over the long 700 years, the king's descendants have forgotten their original promise. A chain shatters, symbolizing the breaking of the contract. As a glowing key appears, a shocked Amelia realizes the king has died. A blonde man first demands Amelia's complete devotion, then cruelly admits he was just using her. She clutches her skirt, feeling the contract with him disappear. Believing she has no reason to live, she raises a glowing dagger to end her life. She plunges the blade in her chest, only to discover in horror that she cannot die. A magnificent manor appears, and a voiceover delivers shocking news to Amelia. A gray-haired man joyfully announces that Lord Iris has proposed to a good-for-nothing like her. The pink-haired Amelia is stunned after receiving a marriage proposal from the young hero, Lord Iris Charlier. She thinks to herself that she lacks the magical talents of her sisters. Surrounded by thorns, she explains that her only power is the ability of nullification. She doesn't understand why he would want to marry someone who cannot command the elements. She assumes it's a mistake, but her father proudly proclaims that their family is blessed by the gods. As she quietly watches her father, the blonde Lord Iris arrives with a bouquet, his appearance surprising Amelia. He eagerly asks her to marry him, explaining he was so impatient that he came in person. She nervously clutches the fabric of her skirt. She tries to refuse, explaining that without magic, she is no different from a commoner. Lord Iris gently takes her hand, telling her that she, Amelia Ronan, is the one he has chosen. The naive, noble girl looks up at him with hope, finding herself unable to refuse his offer. Lost in his proposal, she pledges her allegiance and vows to protect the nation alongside him. She becomes a vessel for the gods, sacrificing her body without knowing it was all a lie. Standing alone in a dark hall, she realizes the curse of immortality remains with her. She coldly asks if he has any intention of letting her go. A brilliant light of divine power radiates from her body. The new empress is described as a beautiful but cunning woman who has eliminated all of Iris's bloodline. A knock sounds, and Amelia looks toward the door, a small orb of light hovering over her hand. A man in a green coat rushes in to report the former emperor's death, which Amelia says she expected. As he reports that Queen Isolde has staged a coup, the man asks where Lady Amelia is going. Donning a traveling cloak, Amelia announces she is leaving to find the surviving bloodline of Iris, entrusting the Marquis to Laelius. Though the contract is broken, she still cannot die and must find the one blessed child who can finally kill her. The scene shifts to a grand, sunlit palace where the blonde Queen Isolde, dressed in red, angrily orders her servants to find and eliminate everyone with a claim to the throne. A maid nervously reminds Queen Isolde that the Charlier bloodline carries the divine contract. Isolde scoffs, questioning the divine protection and asking the maid if she fears the gods more than her. The terrified maid bows deeply, assuring the queen she does not. A horse gallops frantically through a dark forest. A servant urges his young master to hurry, as a boy named Felix Charlier wonders how things came to this. Felix recalls the bloody scene of the emperor and his entire family being murdered. Fleeing through the forest, he desperately wishes he had the power to do more than just run. The red-eyed, white-haired boy vows to take back the Charlier Empire from someone named Isolde Helcourts. Ornate picture frames display other stories of romance and reincarnation. A figure moves through a moonlit forest as a voice announces their target has been found. A masked archer draws their bow and takes aim. With a whoosh, an arrow pierces flesh and blood splatters. Ugh! The white-haired boy falls to the ground. He stumbles to his feet to find himself surrounded by cloaked assassins, his companion already fallen. A purple-haired woman shields the boy, recognizing him as Felix Ramsel. The woman angrily demands to know why they are targeting the young master. A voice reveals their mission is to erase the former emperor's bloodline. The masked archer coldly states it is their duty. The woman insists the young master is not the emperor's illegitimate son, calling it a baseless rumor. The archer declares the truth doesn't matter. Their orders are to eliminate even those who are merely suspicious. Felix realizes the cunning witch, Isolde Hellcourts, is behind this. An assassin lunges forward, ordering Felix to die for the future of the empire. Young master, his companion leaps in front of the blade, taking the fatal blow for him as Felix watches in horror. The mortally wounded woman, Julianne, urges him to run before collapsing, and he cries out her name. Your turn, the assassin declares, raising their blade for the final strike. Clang! Felix blocks the attack, but realizes he is no match. Desperate and cornered, he remembers the amulet his father gave him. A memory of his father giving him the amulet flashes, and in the present, Felix cries out for his father. The amulet around his neck erupts in a golden light, and a woman in a blue dress magically appears, floating before stunned Felix. Felix stares at her, confused by the sudden magical intervention. The assassins are taken aback, but one of them orders her to be killed. The mysterious woman scoffs, deciding to put them all to sleep. A silent pulse of purple light emanates from the woman. The assassins groan and collapse under her overwhelming magical power. Kneeling by Julianne's body, Felix demands to know who the woman is and what she did. The dark-haired woman turns to face him in the silent forest. She introduces herself as Amelia and asks if he is hurt. Amelia extends a glowing hand to the shocked and grieving boy. Felix takes her hand and is lifted into the air by wind magic, exclaiming wow as they ascend. A glowing orb of light is directed toward the fallen Julianne with an instruction to send her back to the estate. Felix marvels that they are flying, and Amelia announces they are leaving. Amelia and Felix fly away, leaving the abandoned carriage behind in the dark forest. They arrive at another carriage, where a worried man greets them. Amelia waves off his concerns, asking to be let through. Inside the carriage, Amelia gently wipes his face and asks for his name, to which he replies Felix Ramsel. His red eyes widen as she tends to his wounds. Amelia gazes back at him with a calm, scrutinizing look. She asks why the assassins were trying to kill him, but Felix admits he doesn't know. Amelia considers his answer with a thoughtful and knowing expression. As Amelia prepares to leave in another carriage, Felix calls out for her to wait. He stares at the noble crest engraved on the carriage. He recognizes it as the crest of the Ronan family, a powerful neutral faction. Realizing Amelia must be a remarkable mage, Amelia stands alone, gazing at the moonlit mountains. Now an orphan, Felix decides Amelia is his only hope. He runs to her, begging to become her disciple. Amelia is taken aback and politely refuses, explaining she has no interest in taking a student. Past experiences of teaching magic seem to influence her decision. A dejected Felix recalls his narrow escape from death and his own powerlessness. He remembers a happier time, holding the hand of the kind. May Julianne. Through tears, Felix vows to become strong for revenge, so he will never lose anyone again. Amelia coldly asks what she would gain by helping him. He earnestly offers his loyalty and promises to repay her kindness in the future. Amelia skeptically considers his offer of loyalty as a memory from her past services. Her gaze sharpens as she looks directly at him. A flashback reveals her sorrowful conclusion. She knows the true price of loyalty all too well. A flustered Felix insists loyalty is the only thing he has to offer her. She strikes a deal. If he can summon her again, just like before, she will help. Overjoyed, Felix beams, thanking her for the chance. He hugs her tightly, promising he will definitely return to her. Suddenly, the clasp on Felix's cloak begins to glow, catching Amelia's attention. Her eyes widen in surprise at the sudden magical fluctuation. Felix, oblivious, smiles and asks what's wrong. Amelia assures him she will keep her promise and tells him to be on his way. She gives him directions to an inn in the Ronan territory and asks if he has money. Amelia watches him leave with a worried expression. She muses that the child must be special if he can summon her. A fond memory of her holding a smiling Felix flashes in her mind. Amelia pulls up her hood and turns to walk into the dark forest. At an inn, a hooded Felix asks for a room, but is rudely dismissed as a penniless kid. He clutches his money pouch, desperately insisting he has money, while a man lurks nearby. Dejected, Felix wanders alone in a dark alley, letting out a sigh. A hand suddenly grabs him from behind. A knife-wielding thief threatens him, demanding his money. Ugh! Felix refuses, his eyes glowing red as he grips the thief's wrist with surprising strength. The enraged thief raises the knife to stab the defiant boy. Felix now has the knife, but his neck is cut in the struggle. The commotion draws the attention of passers-by, startling the thief. The assassins have found him, and Felix recognizes the archer, fleeing in terror deeper into the alley. Cornered by two assassins, he desperately realizes he was found too quickly. The golden amulet on his necklace flashes. With a brilliant light, Amelia appears in a flash of magic, floating above a stunned Felix. She looks down, confused by the sudden summons. Taking in the situation, she realizes she has been summoned to his side again. She sighs, lamenting that being targeted makes Felix feel like a princess in a tragic fairy tale. An assassin unleashes a barrage of fireballs, shouting, "Take this." Amelia calmly counters, summoning chilling water that instantly extinguishes the flames and freezes the assassin in a block of ice. Felix stares in disbelief at her incredible power, realizing she froze them in an instant. Another woman arrives with guards, identifies one of the frozen figures as a mage, and orders magic-suppressing cuffs to be applied. It's Amelia in a different cloak, who tells a happy Felix to follow her. She flies through the sky with Felix to a grand estate, where a butler greets her return. The butler notes her companion and politely welcomes the guest inside. Awestruck by the estate's beauty, Felix follows as Amelia instructs the butler to prepare a room for him. After the butler suggests a bath for him, Amelia touches Felix's cheek and he agrees to wash up. Felix thinks to himself that once he's clean, he wants to get a good look at her. The scene shifts to a lavish and elegantly furnished room. A now refreshed Felix confidently asks if she will finally take him as her student. Amelia, in a fine red dress, declares that she always keeps her word. She asks for his name and age, and he replies Felix, age 13. A flashback shows a younger Felix struggling to control his innate fire and water magic. Amelia considers his request with a thoughtful expression. She openly doubts if she can teach him well. Felix passionately declares he will give it his all and do anything to become strong. She agrees, but gives a stern warning: no complaining, or he'll be expelled on the spot for lack of potential. Overcome with gratitude, Felix hugs her tightly, shouting, "Yes, master, thank you so much." The force of his hug makes them tumble onto a lounge together, and she remarks that he's like an energetic puppy. Felix looks up at her with sincere red eyes, vowing she will never regret taking him on. As he pledges his loyalty, Amelia looks down at him with an unreadable expression. Her gaze suddenly locks onto the golden pendant around his neck, triggering a memory of a blonde man wearing the same one. In a flash of recognition, she realizes the pendant is from someone named Iris. A side note explains the pendant is a magical artifact Iris created specifically to summon her. Clutching the amulet, her mind races as she questions why this child possesses it. A flashback begins, showing a young, pink-haired Amelia recalling how she was asked to make a sacrifice for her country. She remembers being deceived, manipulated, and ambushed for a ritual sacrifice after a gentle kiss from the blonde man. In a cherished memory, the blonde man, Iris, affectionately tells her she is his beloved. She happily recalls the moment Iris proposed to her, thinking of herself as the good-for-nothing of her family. Marrying Lord Iris felt like an impossible dream. As their wedding day approached, she walked with him in the garden, still in disbelief of her good fortune. A close-up reveals Iris's charming yet cunning smile. A young Amelia looks back at him, her face filled with love and innocence. On the wedding day, the scene shifts to a vast, snowy mountain range. A grand and isolated cathedral has been prepared for the ceremony. At the altar, Iris tells Amelia she looks beautiful, and she shyly returns the compliment. A priest begins the ceremony, asking Iris Yulcharlier and Amelia Ronan to exchange their vows. Together, they swear to be with each other for life. The priest smiles, seemingly pleased with their vows. They seal their marriage with a kiss, and Amelia thinks how honored she is to have been chosen. Snap! The beautiful moment shatters, and against a backdrop of splattered blood, Amelia's eyes widen in confusion and shock. The horrifying truth is revealed. Iris stabbed her with a dagger during the kiss. A red, glowing sacrificial circle materializes on the floor beneath her. She weakly reaches out a hand, seeing Iris standing calmly with the bloody dagger, and whispers his title as she collapses onto the ritual circle. He coldly orders the patriarch's ritual to begin. Iris tells her he needs her power, and she realizes in horror that his words of love were all lies to deceive her. His face twists into a vicious snarl as he declares she will serve him and the Empire until she turns to dust, confirming there was never any love. As tears of betrayal stream down her face, she questions if their entire relationship was a lie. With a rumble, the power of the ritual begins to surge. A massive pillar of light erupts from the magic circle, shooting into the sky. Iris laughs triumphantly before the blinding glare. Amelia realizes he even deceived the gods to use her, and she can feel a divine fury rising. Her heartbreak turns to rage as she vows, "I will never forgive you." A mystical light begins to radiate from her wound, pulsing with immense energy. Ugh! The backlash of divine energy sends Iris and a priest flying as another man cries out in alarm. Amelia lies unconscious on the floor, her chest still glowing with a strange, ethereal power. Iris stands among cheering figures, raising a fist to announce the successful sealing of the god. As he orders the creation of a contract of obedience, he twists the dagger still in her wound, causing her to cry out for him to stop. He holds a glowing, key-shaped artifact above her, declaring that as the vessel of a god, she will serve his bloodline. He orders her to serve the nation for eternity as a goddess, then plunges the key into her body, binding her soul with excruciating pain. Paralyzed and glowing, she can only watch as he laughs maniacally in victory. Prince Iris became the emperor, and with that unbreakable contract, he repeatedly used the vessel of the god to harm others. Back in the present, the flashback ends, and the now dark-haired Amelia watches over an old, sleeping Iris, reminding him that he will forever belong to the Empire. An elderly man with long hair rests with a troubled expression. A young, blonde emperor on a throne addresses Amelia Ronan as the vessel of the god. Bound by chains, Amelia defiantly asks why she must use her inherited power for the new emperor. She screams internally that she no longer wants to live just to be used. Even with Iris dead, the ornate key of the obedience contract remains intact. Ordered to obey, Amelia questions her fate, refusing to be used again. Amelia collapses in utter despair. She screams in agony, recalling the centuries of failed suicide attempts, her immortal body trapping her. Suddenly, a divine voice calls out to her, "My vessel," startling her as she floats in a serene space. The voice instructs her to find the blessed child. A vision of a white-haired man appears as the voice explains that only that child can break her curse. Clinging to this new information, she wonders if there truly is a way to break the curse. A faint color of hope emerges, and she quietly wonders if she can finally be free. Back in reality, Amelia watches over the sleeping Felix. Her thoughts return to him. She deduces his pendant marks him as a descendant of Iris's bloodline. She coldly considers if letting the boy die would bring her one step closer to freedom. The camera focuses on Felix, sleeping peacefully, unaware of her dark thoughts. Though she despises Iris and the emperors, she decides that abandoning his bloodline might be meaningless. She gently strokes his hair, admitting to herself that the boy has done nothing wrong. Gazing at the moon, she resolves not to waste her life on resentment anymore. She just wants to be free. The next morning, a serene Amelia enjoys a cup of tea in a bright conservatory. An energetic Felix rushes in, happily greeting her in a cute chibi form. He eagerly pleads for Lady Amelia to begin his training. She smiles, thinking that despite his lineage, he is nothing like Iris. She stands with a gentle smile, her mind made up. Walking ahead of him, she decides she isn't heartless enough to kill a child and will train him for now. The scene shifts to the grand, perfectly manicured courtyard of the estate. The lesson begins as she stands before Felix in the courtyard. She quizzes him on the 4 basic elements, which he names correctly. A shimmering gold crystal appears. Above her elegant hand, she summons 4 elemental orbs, explaining that his innate element will feel the most natural to him. Felix blushes with a determined look, excitedly agreeing to try. Suddenly a vision flashes, showing a stern Amelia and a shocked, older-looking Felix. In the vision, she tells the adult, Felix, that her greatest wish is to kill him with her own hands. He asks sadly if her love for him was just a lie. She scoffs, calling their shared fate a curse that was once called a blessing. He cups her face, confessing he's been waiting to be killed by the one he loves. He declares he fell in love with her because she is his end. He pulls her into a kiss, and as he gazes at her, she holds the glowing contract key, asking him to free her from this world. He takes the key and plunges it in her heart as red petals fall. The vision ends, and she wonders if Felix is the blessed child who will finally grant her freedom by killing her. With a determined smile, she decides to grant Felix's wish and raise him to be strong and wise. The scene shifts to the grand imperial palace under a clear sky. A pair of fists slams onto a desk in frustration. The blonde queen angrily berates a cloaked figure for letting their target escape twice. She lets out a roar upon learning their last known location was the Ronan territory. That is the witch's domain. She crumples a report, determined to remove all obstacles in her path. She tears the paper, vowing to leave anyone who dares obstruct her rule to die without a grave. In a flashback, a voice expresses shock at the idea of marrying into the Charlier Empire. A young and distraught blonde woman questions if her father is truly arranging the marriage. The blonde woman insists to an older man that she was raised to be the queen of Hellcourts. Her father wearily admits she has the qualities to rule a kingdom. He continues speaking with a grim expression. Her face contorts in horror as she whispers, "No, that can't be." The scene shifts to a grand, shining imperial palace with golden spires. Subtitles explain she was forced to marry into the Charlier Empire to secure an alliance. In a carriage, her younger self and a white-haired man wave to a cheering crowd. A close-up reveals her cunning and confident smile. A blonde man at a desk dismisses a matter, saying it has been entrusted to the minister. The blonde woman stands by, unimpressed, doubting if this man is truly the emperor. She grits her teeth, believing she is better suited to rule. She decides to exploit her husband's incompetence and slowly seize power for herself. With a sinister smile, she vows that one day she will rule the empire completely. Back in the present, the queen decides they must hand over Felix as well. In another memory, a blonde man advises her that using imperial authority on trivial matters will weaken its prestige. She turns to him with a knowing and sly smile. He kisses her hand, admitting she is correct. Surrounded by roses, he looks at her affectionately, calling her "my dear Gideon." The man, Gideon, asks if the Ronan family is truly a threat, but she dismisses them as a fallen border marquis. The blonde man listens to her with a confident smirk. He explains that the members of the Ronan family are proficient in magic, and each generation produces a Witch of Time. Gideon scoffs, finding the title Witch of Time too flashy. She muses that if such a powerful girl truly exists, she wants to see her for herself. The blonde man agrees with a knowing smile. Gideon announces she will summon the witch at her coronation ceremony. The scene switches to the lush gardens of Amelia's estate. A young Felix attempts to use water magic, but the stream dissipates in his hands. He reflects on his failure while Amelia watches from a distance. He shifts his focus and successfully summons a fireball. As the magic manifests, he reacts with a surprised, "Wow." The flames suddenly lose control. Amelia watches coolly as the fire magic swirls erratically above him. A panicked Felix cries out, "Master Amelia," and rushes to her for help. She calmly instructs him to control the magic by focusing on the desire to protect something. Holding his hand, she asks if he has something he wants to protect. His red eyes fill with a new, intense determination. The fire magic in his hand transforms into calm, gentle water. He looks up with a proud and confident smirk. He gently brings her hand to his lips for a kiss. Amelia smiles warmly, telling him not to rush. Her gentle touch on his cheek makes him blush. Felix looks up at her with adoration, vowing to become strong enough to protect her. A montage begins, showing Felix running through a forest, training relentlessly. He practices his fire magic, now able to control it with focus. After a long day of training, he sleeps soundly in his bed. Watching a slightly older Felix practice magic, Amelia wonders if he possesses a special potential. She watches his progress with a curious and pleased expression. Subtitles explain that expanded education and support made this growth possible. Thanks to these efforts, even talented orphans can thrive. As villagers and children cheer for Amelia, she contemplates quietly in a garden with a thoughtful look on her face. Her assistant reveals that he was one of the orphans she had saved. The assistant confirms her suspicions, revealing that the boy is indeed from the former emperor's bloodline. He speculates that Queen Isolde sent assassins after the boy, recalling Felix is terrified. Escape. The assistant worries that harboring the boy will bring danger to Lady Amelia. Amelia stands resolutely, declaring she doesn't care about the risk. She vows to protect Felix at all costs and raise him to be strong. Amelia wonders just how strong he must become to finally grant her freedom, urging him to grow up quickly. A young Felix proudly demonstrates his water magic, calling out for Master Amelia. He runs toward her like an eager puppy while she watches with her arms crossed. He stops before her, eagerly asking about the next step in his training. Amelia watches with a melancholic and distant expression. He realized, no matter how strong he became, Isolde wouldn't be the only enemy he couldn't kill. Understanding her hidden meaning, Felix's eyes widened in surprise as he agreed. The scene shifts to a gloomy forest under a blood-red sky. A cloaked Felix looked around, appearing a bit nervous. Amelia warned him that this forest was teeming with magical beasts. She showed him a map of the area, explaining that the deeper he went, the stronger the beasts would be, but they would also provide him with valuable hunting materials. A small, cat-like magical beast appeared, and Amelia instructed him to attack, warning that appearances can be deceiving. Felix agreed with determination, summoning swirling water magic with both hands. He commanded the water to freeze into sharp blades of ice. His attack stopped right in front of the magical beast, which was looking up at him innocently. Amelia observed him, noting that he couldn't even bring himself to kill a monster. She warned that he couldn't afford such sentimentalities, as magical beasts will attack the moment they see an opening. Suddenly, the small creature transformed into a huge, ferocious monster. As the monster's claws came down, Felix thought to himself that he couldn't always be the one being protected, just as Amelia's barrier blocked the attack. Despite his fear of killing, Felix gritted his teeth, knowing he had to fight. When the monster turned towards Amelia, he yelled, "Teacher Amelia!" unleashing a barrage of ice bullets that hit the monster's flank. As the monster dissipated, Amelia praised him, saying he could do it if he tried. Felix was panting and exhausted, but relieved after the intense battle. He anxiously scolded her for putting herself in danger, but she seemed puzzled by his emotional outburst. He blushed, frustratedly insisting that his concern was what mattered most. Amelia watched the boy with a gentle and understanding gaze. She cautioned him that reckless actions don't guarantee success, as survival often depends on luck. Standing beside him, she explained that to protect something precious, one must be prepared to kill. A vision of an adult Felix lovingly embracing Amelia flashed through his mind. Amelia looked at him, puzzled by his sudden silence. The blushing Felix hardened his resolve, determined to grow up quickly and become strong enough to protect her. Amelia watched him with a complex and inscrutable expression. Whoa! Felix threw a rock to lure another magical beast, surprised when it transformed into a giant, three-eyed monster. With growing confidence, Felix swung a magic-infused sword at the roaring monster. After the battle, he admitted to Amelia that he had let his guard down. Later, Amelia arranged for Felix to study etiquette and imperial studies and decided to find a swordsmanship instructor herself. Her aide smiled and agreed to carry out her orders. The scene shifts to the magnificent headquarters of the Ronan territory's Night Order. A blond man in a white uniform smiled, noticing a noble lady had come for an inspection. He guided Amelia, who had changed into a formal blue gown, towards the training grounds. As they approached a large archway, the sound of a commotion came from within. Amelia asked what was happening, and the man explained that a trial spar seemed to have gotten out of hand. A rugged man fiercely parried a training staff. Spotting an opening, he brutally kneed his opponent. After his victory, he shouldered the staff and challenged the next fighter. A man in a white uniform suddenly shouted for them to stop. The uniformed man nervously tried to reason with the defiant brawler. The blond man explained that the brawler's name was Ronan, a former mercenary. Amelia listened from the side of the training grounds as Ronan stood ready with his wooden staff. TSK. In a tavern, Ronan was fuming over his rejection from the Night Order. First, it was the bad attitude. A man suddenly sucker-punched. Ronan angrily threw a punch back, knocking the man away. The enraged attacker cursed and began to summon fire magic. A burst of flame erupted, and Ronan gasped in surprise. The flames suddenly vanished, leaving Ronan standing stunned and confused. He looked down to see the attacker already collapsed on the floor. A cloaked Amelia appeared, calling it a cowardly act to use flames on a non-magic user. With a sly smile, she offered him a job as a swordsmanship instructor. He reacted with disbelief as she explained the need for a combat teacher for her disciple. Ronan scoffed at the idea of her having a disciple. She assured him the pay would be handsome. As a final condition, she promised to get him accepted into the Night Order. He stared in shock at an acceptance letter from the Ronan Night Order. The scene shifts to a sunny, elegant room. Amelia held a letter sealed with red wax. She read the letter with a contemplative expression. Her worried aide stood by, observing her reaction. He suggested the letter's contents might just be rumors she could ignore. Amelia, believing it foolish to avoid conflict, decided to accept the Empress's invitation. A promotional page shows several other romance fantasy series. Her aide warned her that being called the Witch of Time was a clear provocation. She calmly stated that a peaceful discussion would be the best outcome. Her eyes narrowed, glinting with a cold, determined light. The narration explains that while her contract forbids harming Iris's bloodline, Empress Isolde is not protected. With new resolve, Amelia told her aide she would not lose. She took a sip of tea, thinking they couldn't let their guard down, as the invitation was likely a trap. Amelia stared ahead, pondering the Empress's intentions. Her aide bowed, accepting her decision. The scene shifts to a grand manor under a bright sky. Felix gasped in shock upon learning that teacher Amelia was attending Empress Isolde's coronation. His expression was filled with panic and fear. He rushed to Amelia, insisting the Empress must be plotting something. The screen shows an empty room, with a thought bubble explaining that refusing the invitation would cause more trouble. Felix worried that the Empress had already discovered he was hiding here. He sweated nervously, his anxiety growing. He pleaded with Amelia to let him accompany her. Amelia coldly refused his request, stating it was impossible. She ignored his concerns, looking away indifferently. Turning to leave, she instructed her aide to take care of Felix. A well-dressed Ronan arrived to fulfill his promise. He gently kissed Amelia's hand, vowing to repay her kindness. She smiled, saying he looked like a proper knight now. Under Felix's glare, Amelia told Ronan she wasn't jealous that the boy was his student. Her expression turned serious and intense. Ronan smiled warmly at a nervous-looking Felix. Whoa! He playfully ruffled Felix's white hair. The sudden affection left Felix flustered and blushing. Ronan held his wooden staff, ready for their first lesson. Whoa! Felix nervously readied his own staff. As they headed outside, Amelia watched from a window as their training began. She watched with a gentle and satisfied smile. A black-haired woman with pointed ears and a mysterious air stared contemptuously at the imperial palace. Servants were busy transporting tributes for the new empress. The blonde-haired Gideon stood by Empress Isolde, noting that the lords all welcomed her ascension. Gideon smiled with smug satisfaction. Isolde mused that with the main target gone, it was time to send assassins. Gideon gave a sinister smile at the suggestion. Isolde grabbed Gideon's chin, forbidding him from participating and ordering him to stay in the castle for security. He reluctantly agreed, replying, "Understood." Walking alone, on a path, Gideon was lost in thought, touching his neck. His purple eyes narrowed as he contemplated his situation. He realized that with Isolde on the throne, his own power was now being restricted. He gritted his teeth in anger. His thoughts turned to Amelia, the Witch of Time. With a cunning smile, Gideon vowed to see Amelia soon. A set of exquisite jewelry was displayed for Amelia to choose from. Amelia pondered what to wear to the coronation. Her aide approached, and she addressed him by his name, Lelius. Lelius and Amelia discussed preparations for the event. Lelius stated that he would need to coordinate his attire with hers. She had lived in complete seclusion for nearly 2 years under the alias Mary, rarely going out or seeing anyone. She briefly considered that coordinating their outfits might stir up troublesome engagement rumors. She briefly considered taking Ronan as an escort. At the coronation ball, Amelia arrived with Lilith, causing a stir among the guests. A flashback reveals Empress Isolde seizing the throne, leading a terrified Felix to flee. All of the Emperor's children were killed, except for Isolde's own son, Gideon. Realizing Isolde's plan, Amelia knew Felix was now the Empress's next target. She changed her mind, deciding to go to the coronation alone. She stared out the window, lost in thought. Lelius questioned her decision, suggesting that bringing an escort would help avoid unwanted attention. Amelia, with a confident, she stood alone, thinking that the elder was an impressive figure, worthy of standing by her side. He silently. Amelia sensed someone hiding nearby and called out. Felix emerged from the shadows, ashamed and apologizing for eavesdropping. He asked why she wasn't taking Ronan, but she deemed a bodyguard unnecessary. She explained that Rodan's duty was to stay and protect him. Felix still looked worried, admitting that while she was strong, he was still scared for her. He gasped anxiously, worried for her safety. Amelia firmly reminded him that he was not invited and could be killed if discovered. She sat down, her decision made. Unbeknownst to her, assassins sent by Isolde had already infiltrated the territory. The confident Empress Isolde already suspected where Felix was hiding. Amelia calmly anticipated that the enemy would soon make a move. The screen shows a more mature, resolute Felix standing in a field of flowers with a sword. The younger Felix blushed, excitedly asking if it was true. Amelia placed a finger on her lips, quieting him and telling him with a confident smile that he must first pass her trial. A smug Empress Isolde announced his trial. To survive being hunted by assassins, she would send people after him. Felix stood solemnly, understanding the grim conditions he had to meet. Amelia confirmed the terms of the trial, and Felix firmly replied, understood, and accepted. He pondered how to defeat the assassins without harming anyone nearby. In the forest, Ronan confronted a cloaked figure. Beginning the trial, ugh, as one assassin grunted, Felix quickly engaged another in a sword fight. Felix sneered at their coordinated attack, deciding to unleash a gust of wind magic to gather them together. Ugh! The assassins cried out in pain from the powerful magical blast, thrown into disarray. One assassin countered by summoning a swirling vortex of water around his sword. Felix shouted, "Freeze!" casting a powerful spell that encased his enemies in sharp ice crystals. He looked at his hands in shock, realizing he had suddenly become an adult. He was stunned, baffled by his more mature appearance. Amelia smiled knowingly, thinking to herself that he would surely be popular when he grew up. Looking in a mirror, he was surprised to find his voice had deepened as well. He blushed, hoping teacher Amelia would now see him as a real man. After changing into a fine suit, Felix was ready, and Amelia announced they would begin their preparations. He was ecstatic at the thought of accompanying his teacher. Now towering over her, he smiled and enthusiastically agreed to her plan. An ornate carriage was waiting to take them into the city. Inside the carriage, Amelia announced they had arrived. Wow! A small, chibi Felix expressed his awe. In a high-end boutique, Felix blushed, thinking that shopping with his teacher felt like a date. A charismatic, red-haired man welcomed Lady Amelia, whom she addressed as Elder. The Elder offered to guide Amelia through his shop. Felix watched them, thinking that the Elder was an impressive figure, worthy of standing by her side. He silently vowed that one day he would be the one to escort her. A close-up shows his red eyes, filled with determination. A shop assistant led Felix away to be measured. Meanwhile, Amelia consulted the Elder about a dress. The two continued their pleasant conversation as they browsed. Felix stood patiently while being fitted for his clothes. The Elder held up an elegant gown, suggesting it would suit her perfectly. A tense moment passed between Felix and the Elder. Felix blushed deeply upon seeing Amelia in her new dress. Amelia stood confidently, showing off the stunning green and white gown. She mentioned wanting to check if it was easy to dance in. She seemed surprised by her own words. The elder seized the opportunity, offering his hand and proposing to be her dance partner. He and Amelia danced gracefully amidst falling rose petals. He whispered that she had completely captivated him, making her blush. Felix watched their dance with cold jealousy. The elder motioned for Felix to follow him to another room. The elder gave a smug, knowing smile. He commented that Felix still had room to grow, making him feel inadequate. After the clothes were chosen, Amelia told the elder to have the tailored outfits sent to her manor. A white-haired man, completely smitten, was blushing profusely. He gently held a black-haired woman's hand. Both were in formal attire. The woman, Amelia, decided to pick out some essential accessories. Holding a brooch, she considered infusing it with tracking magic as a precaution. The white-haired man watched her with undisguised adoration. He spoke enthusiastically to a surprised Amelia. The two practiced dancing in a grand, sunlit room. Amelia smiled, encouraging him to relax and move more naturally. "Okay," he replied eagerly, completely flustered and overjoyed. In a flashback, Amelia recalled dancing with the blonde Lord Iris, back when everyone thought she would become the Empress. She reflected that they had underestimated her, as she had never wanted to be Empress. The words of the man who deceived her, the possessive Lord Iris, echoed in her memory. "You will always be mine." Her expression hardened with resolve. She gave him a gentle, reassuring smile. The white-haired man broke into a brilliant, overjoyed smile. Amelia looked up at him with wide, surprised eyes. She looked away, a blush creeping onto her face. "Ah, yes," he stammered, still smiling at her. Later, the man wiped sweat from his brow, looking satisfied but exhausted. He remembered asking Lady Amelia to stay a little longer in the library. He asked Amelia if they could continue their lessons until the coronation. He eagerly explained his desire to properly learn etiquette and dancing. Amelia sighed and agreed, saying it wasn't a burden for him. A red-haired instructor corrected Amelia's posture. The white-haired man watched, cloaked to remain anonymous. They walked through a town market with another woman. He stopped, his gaze drawn to a colorful candy display. Noticing his gaze, Amelia smiled and offered to buy him some. No, he stammered, insisting he was just looking because it was a rare sight. He sparred intensely with a brown-haired man, who complimented his improving skills. Sweating and blushing, he was pleased by the praise. His instructor asked if he'd been hitting on women in town. He defended himself, claiming he was just practicing how to look more mature. The instructor teased that he was still a little boy at heart, which he angrily denied. The instructor waved and left, leaving him to sulk alone. The scene shifts to a serene, elegant living room at night. Lying in bed, he clutched a pillow, wishing he could grow up faster. His red eyes narrowed with intense determination. Step, step, step. At night, he walked purposefully through a building. Ugh. He arrived at a tavern and spoke to the bartender. Two women immediately approached him, captivated by his looks, and invited him for a drink. They started arguing, both wanting him for themselves. As a chibi version of him wondered what Amelia was doing, the women shouted in unison. He politely accepted a beer from the bartender. Suddenly, a brilliant golden light flashed from the drink, startling him. Turning to the women, he calmly told them it was all right with a charming smile. He suggested that it was not good to fight. Oh, he was now slumped against a wall outside, his hand bleeding, clutching the brooch Amelia had given him. Desperate to hear her voice, the brooch glowed and summoned her. Whoa! Amelia appeared before him, and he looked up in awe. She asked what he was doing out so late. The white-haired man suddenly hugged Amelia, who cried out in surprise. She scolded him for reeking of alcohol, asking if he had been drinking. Calling him a troublesome boy, she created a guiding light, telling him it was time to go home. The scene shifts to their grand manor under a starry night sky. Amelia watched over sleeping Felix in bed. She turned to leave the quiet room. Suddenly, Felix's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. She looked down at him with a gentle, knowing expression. Felix leaned over her, desperately asking what it would take for her to see him. As a grown man, in a vision of white flowers, he pinned her beneath him, asking if she would see him as a man then, as she looked up in shock. But she remained silent and confused. He moved closer, earnestly asking what he needed to do for Lady Amelia to see him as a man. Amelia was taken aback by his intense and sudden confession. She thought to herself that the age gap between her and Felix wasn't actually that large. As he held her, she mentally dismissed the thought, thinking no, definitely not. In a flashback, she recalled living a loveless life because of Iris. Empress. Lying beneath him, she thought sadly that she no longer knew how to love someone. She wondered what would have been like if she had met a straightforward man like Felix when she was younger. A vision of a smiling, white-haired man appeared in her thoughts. As she imagined a past romance, she doubted if her heart could respond to such pure affection. Snapping back to reality, she felt flustered, realizing the 700-year age gap between them. To Felix, she thought she must be ancient history. As he looked down at her, a confused Felix suddenly recoiled in horror as he realized what he was doing. He scrambled off the bed, apologizing profusely. He covered his face, mortified. Amelia sat up, calmly observing that he clearly had no tolerance for alcohol. The two now stood facing each other in the bedroom. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Amelia thought that one day a fine woman would stand by his side. In quiet reflection, she gently placed a hand on her abdomen. She proposed a deal. If his love for her lasted until he became a true man, she would make a request of him. Felix eagerly promised to do anything, but she cautioned him not to answer rashly. She soberly reminded him that human emotions are fickle. He paused, then asked what would happen if his feelings for her never changed. He earnestly pleaded for Lady Amelia to see him as a grown man when that day comes. She smiled, thinking he really wanted to be treated like an adult. She recalled him vowing in the past to become strong and repay her kindness. She gently stroked his hair, warning him not to pursue too many goals at once. She lifted his chin, telling him he would be a true man when his feelings were unwavering and his goals were achieved. He blushed with joy, whispering a soft yes. His expression hardened with resolve, thinking it would be impossible if he remained too gentle. Amelia stood before him, speaking of the day he would grow into that man. She kissed his forehead, wished him good night, and left, leaving him standing stunned. A new day began at a grand, gated estate. Amelia explained to Felix that this was the Ronan family's manor in the capital. Felix added that the manor was protected by a defensive barrier, ensuring their safety. Amelia turned back, sternly reminding him not to forget that. Felix respectfully replied, understood, acknowledging her warning. Her aide, Lelius, was surprised to learn the Ronan family had a manor in the capital. Amelia explained that the Marquis of Ronan had long-standing ties with the imperial family. At night, a melancholic, blue-haired woman mused quietly by a window. In a flashback, she recalled being summoned daily merely for a show of power. A noble lady whispered to her companion, fearful of the former concubine's monstrous power. A blonde nobleman scoffed arrogantly, certain she would never dare to defy him. The black-haired woman sighed, tired of the court's foolishness. At a banquet, another lady walked past her, adding to her isolation. Your Majesty, the Empress. The Empress smiled smugly, mocking her for being offered as a sacrifice. As a vision of her holding a baby appeared, the Empress cruelly denied that she was loved. She scoffed inwardly, thinking she would never make such a foolish mistake. The nobles of the court buzzed with excitement about the Empress's pregnancy. She walked down a hallway, hoping the birth of an heir would finally ease the Empress's hostility. Her thoughts were interrupted as she saw the pregnant Empress on the stairs below. The Empress suddenly lost her balance and fell down the stairs. The black-haired woman reacted instantly, casting a spell and shouting, "Look out!" A magical cushion safely landed the Empress on the ground, amazing the onlookers. The Empress stared at her savior with pure hatred, thinking which, on a balcony, she framed her savior for trying to cause her miscarriage. Stunned by this betrayal, the woman thought, I saved her, and yet. Rumors spread among the maids, twisting the rescue into an assassination attempt. After a meal was delivered, she was seen bound and crying out in pain. Ugh! She considered retaliating with her sealed divine power, but knew it would only make things worse. She decided to endure until the heir was born, watching as wine was poured. Suddenly, a searing pain burned her throat, and she realized she had been poisoned. Her own divine power became a curse, preventing death and trapping her in endless agony. After recovering, she was summoned by Iris to another banquet. She stood alone, composed, amidst a crowd of faceless party guests. A passing noblewoman accidentally spilled a drink on her. Clutching the stained fabric, she silently wondered why she had to endure this endless torment. Her expression hardened with resolve, deciding she would no longer tolerate this harassment. She wondered why Iris allowed this to continue while he socialized socialized happily nearby. Realizing he pitted everyone against each other for power, she deemed him despicable and formed her own plan. His greed for power led him to interfere with neighboring countries, orchestrating wars. She recalled fighting in his wars, earning the Ronan territory as her reward. She reflected that his cold, ruthless nature was what made him an emperor. She remembered how he saw everyone, herself, the Empress, and all his concubines, as mere tools for his empire. Their scorn had transformed into expressions of pure, undisguised fear. Back in the present, she stood with quiet, unshakable purpose. But not everyone bowed to the emperor's will, as shown by the defiant, red-eyed Isolde. Lelius expressed his concern, asking what she would do if she were humiliated at the coronation. Her determined expression remained unchanged, showing her resolve. An aide worried that the Ronan territory would be attacked, but she dismissed the threat. She proudly explained that she had spent centuries building her lands into a military and economic powerhouse. With a vision of breaking chains, she declared that nothing could bind her anymore. She claimed her territory was now so powerful it could even declare itself an independent nation. A confident, knowing smile played on her lips as she weighed her newfound freedom. She added with a smirk that she had an ace up her sleeve if things got difficult. Her two loyal aides could only be baffled by her mysterious confidence. Her advisor reminded her that tradition required all territories to present a tribute to the new emperor. The advisor reminded her again about the tradition of tribute. Amelia gave a cunning smile, announcing it was time to go collecting. The scene shifts to a grand city 1 week before Isolde's coronation. A blonde nobleman sat in contemplation, addressed as Lord Gideon. Gideon let out a short, calculating laugh. He instructed a cloaked subordinate to investigate further and report back. He pointed and summoned another aide, who responded promptly, "Yes, sir." Gideon asked his aide how his mother was doing. The aide reported that his mother also seemed to have some hidden plans. Thump, thump. A knock at the door interrupted Gideon's thoughts, and a dignified woman with long blonde hair walked in. Surrounded by his attendants, Gideon stood up and asked if something was wrong with his mother. She told him with a cunning smile that they needed to talk. She reminded him that nobles from all over the country would be attending the coronation ceremony. Looking him straight in the eye, she announced her intention to choose a fiancé for him. Gideon sneered coldly, replying that it was too early to talk about that. No, his mother retorted as a teacup shattered on the floor. She argued that behind-the-scenes manipulation was necessary to consolidate their power. With a sinister smile, she called him the sole legitimate heir to the imperial bloodline and vowed to select a suitable partner for him from a prominent family. She grabbed his arm, adding that anyone who opposed her would be made an example of. Realizing that Amelia might become his mother's next target, Gideon sneered, deciding to see how she would handle the upcoming harassment. He leaned back on the sofa, lost in thought. The scene changes to the bustling streets of the imperial capital. An aide named Ronan helped Amelia down from the carriage. She told him she was going out for a while. Ronan smiled and responded to her request with a simple understood. He stood guard outside the building, waiting patiently. A frantic young woman ran breathlessly down the street. She desperately grabbed Rodin's uniform, pleading for help. When he asked what had happened, she knelt before him, crying that something terrible had occurred. Ronan averted his gaze and began to politely refuse her request. The woman grabbed him and pulled him along, shouting for him to follow her. 3 rough-looking men across the street spotted them, yelling, "There they are!" As he was being dragged away without a word, the woman urged him to hurry. Amelia emerged from a shop, confused to find Ronan gone. She dismissed his absence, thinking, "Oh well, let him be." She calmly instructed the driver to take her to the central cemetery. Her hand placed a bouquet of beautiful flowers on a tombstone engraved with the name Ronan. The ethereal images of a white-haired man and a woman appear before her. A sudden noise startled her, causing her to whirl around. She stood alone on the path, a sense of unease washing over her. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw a familiar blond man smiling at her. Stunned, she silently chanted his name, Iris, convinced that he should be dead. The man who looked just like Iris smiled warmly amidst a shower of red roses. She stumbled backward, refusing to believe that Iris could still be alive. Her mind raced with panic, wondering if she was seeing a ghost. The blond man stood before her, looking imposing in the silent cemetery. He sneered, commenting that it was dangerous for a lady to be alone in a cemetery. He extended a hand to the wary Amelia. With a charming smile, he offered to escort her back to her estate. Amelia wondered if the approaching man was also in danger. A blond man with a confident sneer greeted Amelia. She eyed him suspiciously, determined to uncover his motives. He took her hand and introduced himself as Aiden Parker. Aiden kissed her hand, adding that he was the second son of a baron. Amelia recalled that his family were wheat farmers from the West. He laughed, joking that his parents were probably furious with him for running off. His eccentric behavior made her increasingly uncomfortable. She tried to leave, stating that her attendant was waiting for her. As a glint appeared in his red eyes, he whispered his disappointment. He glanced behind her and spotted two men in uniform in the distance. A cunning and knowing smile spread across his face. He suddenly grabbed her wrist, pleading for her to stay with him. "Hey!" she cried out as he pulled her off the path. Holding her tightly, he whispered an apology and asked her to pretend to be his lover. He explained that his servants were looking for him as he pressed her against a tree. He continued to hold her firmly. Annoyed, Amelia noted his resemblance to Iris, as well as his rude and disrespectful behavior. The two men in uniform searched the grounds and concluded he wasn't there. Phew! Aiden sighed in relief after they left. Amelia placed a hand against his chest, trying to push him away. She silently threatened to blast him with magic if he didn't back off. He released her hand and simply apologized. Flustered, she tried to convince herself that he was just a look-alike, not a ghost from her past. She thought that while Felix also looked similar, his personality was much more honest. Aiden's eyes widened in shock. He thought to himself that although she was smiling now, he had never seen her smile in his memories. He asked to meet again to thank her properly. Amelia turned to leave, thinking they would probably not meet again. She said her goodbyes and walked away. Aiden watched her go. His expression was unreadable. Later, he realized she was Amelia Ronan, the infamous Witch of Time. He recalled seeing the woman he admired in his dreams, picturing her before a grave in a memory of a past life. Amelia was the first person he had ever seen. He thought to himself that she was still as beautiful as ever. He described her as a strong and tragic woman who carried the power of a god. He clenched his fist, his eyes glowing. He vowed to make her his. A promotional page showed other series offered by the publisher. A carriage left the grand estate. Amelia instructed her coachman to return to a shop they had visited earlier. She gazed out the window, lost in thought. Her aide suddenly looked worried. He rushed to the carriage door, asking if she was all right. Amelia assured him she was fine, just ready to go home. A smiling Felix warmly welcomed Lady Amelia back to the mansion. He turned to the aide, asking if something had happened to her. The aide explained that she had been unusually quiet the entire way back. Felix watched with a worried expression, lamenting that he was still powerless to help her. In the living room, Amelia pondered the encounter alone. She recalled the man who bore a striking resemblance to Iris, whose bloodline she had thought was extinct. Amelia remained lost in thought, her expression unreadable. The scene changes, and the bells of the grand city ring out. A new empress has been crowned, ascending the throne. Thunderous applause erupted as Amelia and her aide watched from the crowd. After the coronation, a lavish ball began at the imperial palace. Her aide navigated through the bustling crowd of nobles. Felix stood with Amelia in formal attire. A guest wondered about the beautiful woman accompanying the Marquis of Ronan. Amidst the grand celebration, Amelia appeared somewhat ill at ease. She turned to Felix and gently told him to relax. He responded eagerly, trying to compose himself. With a confident smile, Amelia promised to protect him. She recalled her past, when elemental magic had saved her from being burned as a witch, though poison and stab wounds still brought pain. A chibi Amelia mischievously thought that cleaning up bloodstains was such a hassle. Her aide continued to move through the crowded ballroom. Amelia's sharp gaze revealed her firm resolve. The scene briefly shows an empty, ornate hall. Felix anxiously thought about how a foreign woman now ruled the empire. He mused that if nothing happened to Lord Gideon, the bloodline of Iris might rise again. He grimly recalled that all the other princes had been purged. A painful memory surfaced. Isolde's cruel orders, how Julian died to protect him, and how Lady Amelia saved his life, making him long to end this tyranny. He questioned if he had the strength to face Isolde. His thoughts turned to the mysterious Grand Prince Gideon. He recalled not seeing Gideon at the coronation and worried if the prince wanted him dead too. Amelia stood alone, scanning the dance floor, when a man called out her name. Felix watched from a distance. The blond man, Aiden, approached Amelia with a sneer, greeting her again. He held out his hand, asking for a dance. Amelia flatly refused, stating she already had enough partners. Aiden moved closer, implying he wouldn't cause trouble if she accepted. In a chibi-style exchange, she pointed out other women, but he insisted he only wanted her. Amelia glared at him. Her patience was wearing thin. Aiden, with a confident smile, told her to look forward to it. He walked away and was immediately surrounded by a group of admiring ladies. Amelia sighed in frustration. Then she noticed Felix looking a bit flustered, as he too was being surrounded by women. The grand ball continued, with couples twirling on the dance floor. A brilliant crown rested on a velvet cushion. Empress Isolde wore the crown, her expression solemn and cold. The newly crowned Empress, in all her glory. Amelia stared at the Empress, wondering if she was being ignored or had truly not been recognized. Felix watched Isolde from afar, identifying her as his enemy. He wondered if she would recognize him as an adult, but remained vigilant. The Empress seemed to glance in his direction, making him flinch. On her throne, she formally accepted the golden scepter of power. She announced her ascension as the new Empress. She spoke of the former emperor's corruption and the chaos that had befallen the empire. She blamed the rampant corruption on a false compromise with her homeland. Raising the scepter, she vowed to rebuild and forge a new, powerful empire. A cheer erupted from the crowd, shouting, "Long live Empress Isolde of Charlotte." A dignified blonde woman smiled with smug satisfaction. The crowned empress confronted a viscount, accusing him of obstructing her ascension. The viscount broke into a cold sweat at her accusation. The empress coldly ordered the guards to take him away. "As you command, your majesty." She turned her attention, questioning an imported tea set presented by an earl. She asked sinisterly if foreign goods were a suitable gift for her. The earl apologized frantically, explaining he had chosen it only for its rarity and would find another gift. Tapping her fan, she demanded he hand over his family's most precious heirloom, a jewel. She celebrated her victory internally, declaring the empire was finally under her control. She reflected on her bloody path to power, killing her husband, eliminating rival princes, and planning to conquer neighboring countries to build a greater empire. She manipulated a doll representing her son, vowing to be remembered as the empire's founder and to make Gideon the greatest emperor in history. Elsewhere, Amelia and her aides were discussed as the Ronan family who had taken in the former emperor's illegitimate son. The empress vowed to make an example of defiant nobles, while Amelia calmly assessed her as an unwise ruler. Amelia thought that while Iris's heir had never been so vicious, this new empress felt surprisingly similar to him. Her expression hardened as she calculated her next move. With Iris's bloodline gone, she felt the country could no longer bind her. Amelia and her aides formally congratulated the new empress. The empress spoke to them from her throne with a slight sneer. Amelia's brown-haired advisor smiled slyly, ready to play his part. He continued, with carefully chosen words. The empress flinched, her thoughts turning to the survivor of the former emperor's bloodline. The advisor innocently asked if anyone besides a criminal was worthy of her personal search. The empress gritted her teeth, barely suppressing her rage. Amelia internally praised her advisor, Ruthless, for his perfect response. The empress angrily dismissed the person as a mere thief and demanded that Ruthless hand over the criminal, even if it was a child. To this, he calmly agreed it was his duty. Ruthless maintained his composure. An affable smile. She clenched her fist, angrily demanding proof and scoffing at their arrogance for having it. The Witch of Time. The empress stood up, demanding they prove their loyalty now. She proposed that Amelia serve in the inner palace. She issued a veiled threat, warning that the Ronan territory should not risk being labeled as traitors. Suddenly, Gideon stepped forward, calmly stating he would overlook such suspicions. The white-haired aide panicked, thinking Lady Amelia was now in danger. Amelia was pushed to the ground, looking up and wondering why she had to suffer this treatment. Amidst a shower of roses, Gideon dramatically pleaded, "Please wait, Your Majesty." He repeated his plea, his expression earnest. Amelia was shocked by his intervention, wondering what he was doing. The scene lingers on. A magnificent crystal chandelier, hinting at his status. Gideon's gaze was sharp, contemplating the connection to the Ronan family. He suggested with a charming smile that a fiancé for the crown prince would be more suitable than a handmaiden. Amelia was shocked that a mere baron's son would dare to interrupt such a high-level discussion. She glared at him, silently warning him not to blame her if he was courting death. The Empress rejected the idea, stating that a family suspected of treason could not produce a future empress. Gideon clarified that Amelia was just one of several candidates. He pointed to other noble women, suggesting princesses and daughters of prominent families as other options. He announced that the most suitable bride would be chosen from among them, and the Empress seemed to consider his cunning proposal. She held her fan thoughtfully, weighing her son's unexpected move. Smiling, the Empress agreed to hear his opinion on the matter. Gideon sneered. His plan had succeeded. Amelia was completely bewildered, questioning his use of the word son. She realized his identity as a baron's son was a lie, recalling a vision of his true, more powerful self. The Empress proudly introduced her son, Crown Prince Gideon. Gideon, with a sinister smile, offered a pleasant greeting. He said he looked forward to getting to know them. As Amelia's aides bowed respectfully, Amelia glared at him with cold fury. Her white-haired aide watched with anxious concern. He worried about Lady Amelia being placed in the inner palace. The Empress informed Amelia that she must now learn court etiquette. Aurelius realized the accusation was a serious and calculated move. Amelia sighed, admitting the situation had become troublesome. The Empress smugly declared it an honor and arranged a formal meeting with Crown Prince Gideon. As her carriage departed, an aide worriedly asked if Amelia was all right. Amelia confidently told him not to worry, planning to use an illusion to make Gideon reject her. She gave final instructions for if she hadn't returned by nightfall. Her white-haired aide listened, his face etched with worry. The day arrived. Amelia had her formal audience with Gideon in his magnificent palace. Dressed in a purple gown, Amelia formally greeted the smiling crown prince. Gideon apologized for his earlier deception, explaining he couldn't reveal his identity in public for security reasons. He raised his teacup, suggesting. They discussed matters over tea. He calmly sipped his tea, observing her. Amelia's vision suddenly blurred, and she realized something was wrong before passing out. A smiling Gideon stood over her unconscious body, wishing her a good night. Amelia groaned, now lying senseless in bed. Upon waking, she realized the tea had been drugged and cursed herself for letting her guard down. Looking at the moon, she worried about Felix and her other aides. Click! She reached for the window, only to be blocked by a glowing magical barrier. Startled, she wondered if the room was sealed by a barrier. She questioned if Empress Isolde planned to torture her for information. She noted with self-mockery that the room was far too luxurious for that purpose. Gideon appeared and greeted her, caressing her face and saying he could finally touch her. A shocked Amelia wondered what he was doing. A vision of a solemn, sneering Gideon appeared, surrounded by purple roses. She thought angrily that killing the crown prince would be a huge hassle. She clutched her dress, feeling her power suppressed. Touching her chin, she confirmed her magic had been sealed. As she demanded he stop joking, he pulled her close, whispering that he had waited a long time for this moment. He grimly announced that tonight they would become husband and wife. Outside, the white-haired aide looked up at the palace under the night sky. He recalled Amelia's warning, if she wasn't back by nightfall, to assume she had fallen into a trap. His face became grim, calling her name with worry. The white-haired aide summoned a companion, declaring, "Let's go, Felix." The other person agreed. Gideon, with a possessive smile, called her my Amelia. She turned her head away as he tried to touch her face. TSK. He leaned in for a kiss while her eyes burned with fury. What? She slapped him hard, shouting stop. He invited her to struggle, wanted to see every side of her. Amelia stood defiantly by the window. She clenched her fists, her patience worn out. Bang! The white-haired aide burst through the door, drawing his sword and shouting her name. Gideon, holding Amelia, looked up in shock and asked, "What?" The white-haired aide crossed swords with Gideon, shouting angrily, "You!" TSK. The aide was knocked back by the force of the blow. A wave of dizziness hit the white-haired aide as he struggled to stay focused. Gideon sneered, noting his opponent had used troublesome magic to hide his tracks. The aide's eyes burned with a red glow as he yelled, "Don't touch Amelia!" Gideon noted internally that a royal relative had fallen for Amelia. was a problem. He condescendingly dismissed the aide as a mere boy. Gideon suddenly kissed Amelia possessively, announcing, "Amelia is mine." The white-haired aide watched in horror, Amelia's eyes glowing with shock. The aide furiously unleashed a wave of blue magic, roaring at Gideon to get away from Lady Amelia. Gideon was sent flying by the magical force. He thought in annoyance that his opponent could use magic too. Gideon smiled cruelly, deciding it was best to kill him right here. The white-haired aide gathered his power, declaring he would not lose. Gideon raised his sword, summoning a massive magic circle for defense. The aide's magic was deflected, sending him flying with a scream. As Gideon stood victorious, Amelia silently wondered if the aide was dead. She watched, her face pale with fear. A blushing Gideon told Amelia he was happy this was the first time she had called him Gideon. He moved closer, announcing that tonight she would finally be his because she belonged to him. A dark and obsessive vision of Gideon filled her mind, surrounded by chains. Amelia decided she would rather die now. She thought of how her death would scar Felix's heart, who was groaning in pain. The scene shifts, and Felix watches in confusion, now seeing Amelia in someone else's arms. A glowing, ornate key suddenly emerged from her chest. She told him that if he pulled out this key, she would be free. Felix gazed at her, his expression a mix of sorrow and resolve. In another timeline, Felix was violently kicked away by Gideon. Kneeling by the bed, Felix asked if he just needed to pull out the key, and she confirmed it, their hands overlapping on the glowing key above her chest. He held her hand tightly, preparing to pull out the key. Surrounded by roses, he held her close, promising to finally free her from this eternal life. As he pulled, she thought, "I can finally die." Felix now held the glowing key in his hand. The key vanished from Amelia's chest, leaving only a faint glow. As the key disappeared, she clutched her chest, wondering why it hurt. She remembered raising Felix since he was a child, also that he could one day grant her release. Flashbacks of their time together reinforced the idea that there should be no hesitation. Amelia recalled proudly watching Felix grow, noting his talent in both magic and swordsmanship. He closed his eyes in pain, while she watched with a gentle, accepting smile. An enraged Gideon glared from the side. "Don't look at that brat with that expression," Gideon roared possessively. He grabbed her hand, and she noticed he was holding something. Gideon plunged his sword into the floor, recalling the sacred stake Iris had used to seal the god. Amelia realized in horror. He was trying to pull out the stake. Gideon panicked, thinking that releasing the god would also erase Amelia's eternal life. He realized with horror that if her power vanished, she might not just die, but disappear completely. He screamed internally that he absolutely could not let that happen. A memory of Gideon as an emperor surfaced. Recalling the moment, he realized she belonged to Iris. A white-haired boy concluded that if Amelia was immortal, she must still be alive somewhere. The boy, blushing with a determined look, declared that he wanted to see her. In a memory, the Empress embraced a young Gideon, promising to make him the greatest emperor. Her hand cupped his chin as she vowed to eliminate their rivals. Gideon smiled, readily agreeing to his mother's plan. Now an adult, he stood in a bloody scene, sword in hand, declaring this was all to have Amelia and her disappearance would ruin his dream. In reality, Gideon screamed at them to stop, while Amelia urged Felix to pull the key. Gideon desperately shouted a warning that pulling the key would kill Amelia. Felix turned, momentarily confused by the outburst. Gideon, with a furious expression, swung his sword at Felix. Amelia shouted a warning, but Felix was struck hard, Gideon's sword piercing through him. Amelia screamed his name in horror. Holding the dying Felix, she frantically promised to heal him at once. She gathered a glowing orb of healing magic at his wound. Seeing Felix grow weak, she feared he was dying. She felt hopeless, lamenting that despite having the power of a god, she couldn't save her first disciple. A sudden realization sharpened her gaze. The narration explains that the key is the power of the god, and Felix, as a blessed child, could touch it. She realized the only way to save him was to have him inherit her immortality. She apologized to Felix, preparing to transfer the key's power to him. Gideon watched in shock, demanding to know what she was doing. Amelia, with firm resolve, held the glowing key above Felix. She plunged the magic key directly into Felix's chest. A bright light enveloped Felix as the key sank into his body. He opened his eyes, weakly calling Amelia's name. Amelia sadly apologized for imposing the power. She longed to be free of onto him. A revitalized Felix rejected the power, unwilling to let her disappear to save him. An enraged Gideon unleashed a massive blade of purple energy, screaming that he would not let her disappear. The shockwave hit, and Amelia and Felix were caught in a bright explosion. As she realized what was happening, an ice bracelet formed on her wrist. She recalled her request to him long ago to one day kill her for good. A blast of ice magic knocked Felix back. As he desperately reached for her, Amelia, with a serene expression, was completely encased in a massive crystal. A desperate, echoing cry of her name filled the air. The story jumps 5 years later. A mature Felix, with cold determination, vows to bring Amelia back. "You are the one who will kill me, my love." Felix now stood solemnly before a large portrait of Amelia. Looking up at her portrait, he whispered her name. A smiling man in a white uniform announced that the time had finally come. Felix agreed, lamenting that 5 long years had passed. He angrily slammed his fist against the wall, declaring it had been too long. He was furious that his weakness had allowed Gideon to possess her for 5 years. A rage-filled Felix declared they would hurry and take her back. His companion sneered, adding that he was eager to claim his own reward from her. In a brief, stylized interlude, a smug man in white shrugged at an annoyed Felix. The man in white said, "Let's go," and Felix, sword in hand, agreed. A dark memory showed Gideon possessively caressing a terrified Amelia. Gideon recalled his failure, remembering the sacred key that couldn't be pulled out was sealed. Felix recalled how Amelia saved his life by transferring the sacred key to him, which resulted in her being sealed in stone by Gideon. Felix knelt on the ground, crying out in guilt and blaming himself for what happened to Lady Amelia. He remembered a voice telling him she was waiting for the day the Son of God would break the seal, and as he held the key, he realized his destiny. Young Felix, with firm resolve, vows to rescue Lady Amelia no matter what. The scene shifts to the snowy peaks of the Holy Land. 5 years later, on Mount Aurelie, Felix's companion loudly speculates how much the Empress knew about the incident. Felix gazes into the distance, lost in thought. The companion recalls the Empress suppressing the Ronan territory, theorizing that she considered the territory, having lost the time witch, to be no longer a threat. He continues to explain with a knowing expression. He remembers Felix claiming he was going to the battlefield for harsh training, as a bloody memory flashes across the mountains. A younger Felix simply confirms. Felix assures his companion that if the Empress has any schemes, he will sense them beforehand, and the man agrees. The companion suddenly spots a magnificent and ornate temple in the distance. Realizing it's their destination, Felix readies a magical dagger, thinking he must first break the barrier. The blade emits a bright, otherworldly energy. With a powerful cry, Felix unleashes a wave of magic from the dagger. His energy blast collides with a vibrant pink hexagonal barrier. With a bang, the barrier shatters under the force of his attack. The companion cheers that the barrier is finally broken. Felix turns and urges his comrades to follow him as he charges toward the temple. They enter a long, solemn corridor lined with pillars. Bang! Felix shoves open the heavy doors at the end of the hall. Inside, they find Amelia, suspended within a massive blue crystal above an altar. He runs to her, promising he has finally come to save her. He reaches out, his palm glowing as it touches the crystal surface. A grimly determined look crosses his face. A blond man appears with guards, screaming at them not to touch his goddess. The brown-haired companion shouts Gideon's name in terror. Gideon wears a possessive smile, admiring Amelia's beauty and boasting about how much he cherishes her. An enraged Felix channels power into his sword, roaring, "Die!" He leaps into the air, bringing his glowing long sword down on Gideon. Boom! His power strikes the ground, the final shock wave echoing through the hall. A defeated Gideon collapses to the ground amidst the swirling dust. Felix stands victoriously over his fallen foe, turning his attention back to Amelia. He faces the crystal, apologizing for taking so long to gain the power to break the seal. He phases through the crystal's surface, gently taking her hand. As he pulls her out, the massive crystal begins to crack and shatter. With a final flash, the crystal prison dissolves into a million shards. He catches her as she falls, pulling her into a long-awaited, hard-won embrace. Leaning against his shoulder, Amelia slowly opens her eyes. She whispers his name in confusion, and he holds her, telling her he has come for her. Looking around the grand hall, she asks blankly where she is. As memories flood in, she wonders what happened after she gave him the key. From the floor, Gideon weakly orders Felix, "Don't touch her." Driven by rage, Gideon gets to his feet, screaming that he won't let Felix take his goddess. Felix tells him to shut up in a cold tone, his long sword glinting ominously. He raises his long sword as an otherworldly light flashes from outside. A massive explosion tears through the side of the temple. Ugh! Gideon screams amidst the devastating blast. A sword is pressed against Gideon's throat, and he gasps in shock. Felix holds the blade to Gideon's neck, declaring that she is not his and thinking he could easily kill him. God! Gideon chokes in terror, his eyes wide with fear. Felix states his name with cold finality as his companion watches from behind. His palm crackles, glowing with intense, destructive purple energy. He unleashes his magic, blasting a hole in the temple ceiling. The destructive force continues to tear the sacred place apart. The brown-haired companion looks up in horror as rubble falls. Felix, now holding Amelia, glares back at the defeated Gideon, warning him never to touch her again. He floats gently to the ground with Amelia in his arms, using wind magic to cushion their descent. Back at the manor, a man with glasses welcomes Lady Amelia home, and she quietly announces her return. When asked how she is, a small, chibi version of Amelia cheerfully reports that she is well. Amelia sits alone on an ornate sofa, deep in thought. She asks her aide where Felix is, and the man just smiles. He tells her Felix seems busy, and she lowers her head in disappointment. In a flashback, Felix carries her on his back against the sunset, promising they will soon reach the manor. Amelia recalls being told that 5 years have passed since the incident. She watches Felix leave the manor and walk into the night. Standing alone in the darkness, she wonders if he is avoiding her. She laments how much he has changed, wondering if it's because he grew up or because of that fateful day. A frustrated, tiny Amelia seethes with anger against a backdrop of flames. She concludes with annoyance that all of Felix's former charm is gone. She laments that his gaze has grown cold, blaming that man for corrupting her apprentice. Upset by what he was and what he has become, she doesn't know how to face him now. Gazing out the window, she quietly asks what happened to him. Her companions enter the room, and the man in the white uniform suggests she get some rest. Alone again, she realizes that even with the key gone, she hasn't disappeared. A glowing blue orb of magic materializes above her palm. She concludes that the curse of immortality has been transferred to Felix. Along with the key, she sighs, admitting she can't blame him for hating her. In the vast garden, Felix gives a self-mocking sneer. While training, he recalls the day Amelia saved him by transferring the key, which is now embedded in his abdomen. He watches her through the window, relieved that she didn't disappear when he broke the seal. A close-up shows his intensely focused red eyes. He remembers trying to refuse when she placed the key inside him. Alas, he runs a hand through his hair with a hint of frustration. He worries that his love has twisted into an obsession, afraid he might hurt her. With renewed conviction, he vows never to lose her again. A happy memory of hugging her as a child contrasts with his current somber expression. The narrator mentions that, for Amelia, who had slept for 5 years, the changes must be shocking. He recalls the moment he looked down at her after breaking the crystal seal. He lists the many skills he has mastered, from swordsmanship to magic. It was all for Lady Amelia, he reveals. His hand clenches into a determined fist. He remembers telling a smiling Amelia that he worked very hard for her. Recalling this, he feels embarrassed, thinking his words sounded childish, and regrets the awkward silence that followed. As he held her, Amelia asked him to tell her what happened while she was sealed. Felix reports that little has changed, and Amelia finds the lack of movement from the Empress's side surprisingly quiet. Amelia smiles in relief before turning the questions to Felix himself. She gently touches his cheek, asking how he has been. Felix silently agrees that not much has changed for him either. A tense silence fills the dining room as Felix and Amelia sit at opposite ends of a long table. Her gentle question makes him blush and fluster. Amelia smiles warmly as a servant pours a glass of red wine. She watches Felix, who stiffly avoids her gaze. She maintains a gentle and knowing smile. On the sidelines, her aides observe the awkward atmosphere. Later, Felix's companion asks if he managed to talk things out with her. The companion smiles, reminding him of the bond they share as master and apprentice. Another aide, a man named Archie, watches with concern. The companion chuckles, saying it's been 2 years since Archie became Felix's right-hand man. He explains to Archie that to those who only know the present Felix, his coldness must seem strange. They discuss how precious Amelia is to Felix, as she was the one who saved his life. Archie listens intently, digesting the information. The companion admits with a smirk that from an outsider's perspective, their situation is indeed strange. Walking alone down a dark corridor, Felix admits that things are complicated. He steps out of the shadows and into a sunlit garden. A close-up shows the sunlight catching his sharp, red eyes. His companion thinks of Lady Amelia as a clip of their formal meeting flashes by. He lets out a knowing smile. While practicing his swordsmanship, Felix glances up to see Amelia watching from a distant balcony. A close-up reveals Amelia's quietly observant eyes. In a memory, she reflects on the heavy burden of immortality she placed on a young Felix. She recalls her determination to raise him well before she disappeared. To do so, she reaches out her hand, realizing she needs his help. Whoa! While training in a lake, Felix is suddenly alerted by a strange magical presence. A glowing blue sphere appears in his hand, and he wonders what it is. His eyes widen in panic, fearing something terrible has happened to Amelia. He is stunned when a younger version of Amelia is suddenly summoned before him. She calls out his name. Recognizing it as a summons, he rushes out of the water to grab his cloak. As she lands, Amelia's heel catches on the fabric, and she stumbles. "Amelia!" Felix cries out, reaching for her in a panic. He catches her before she falls, holding her securely in his arms.